I hacked his phone now. You didn't see that. Perfect. That was wonderful, right? Now I want to call to the stage another speaker. Are you ready? Yeah. Are you ready? Sorry, he told me that after lunch I need to find a way to wake you up, so I'm doing my best, but my best is not that good. So just for the sake of it, just scream yes, please. Are you ready? Thank you. I get a bonus for that. No, they don't pay me at all. Let me just call to the stage Jonathan Spalter, President and CEO of USTelecom. Yay!
Tov liot.
Perfect. Good luck.
It really is great to be here. And as I am the CEO of USTelecom, which represents all of the broadband companies, large and small, in the United States, and we spend a significant amount of our time and effort really thinking through cybersecurity policy broadly writ on behalf of industry within the communication sector. And I know that our topic today is the role of cyber in wartime, and that is a huge, huge waterfront of an issue. So I was thinking about where to drill down today, and I was reminded that yesterday, many of you know Josh Crom, who is with the U.S. Chamber of Commerce and runs the Israel-U.S. Business Council. He's in the habit of teaching us a Hebrew word of the day, and that word he taught us yesterday was tachlis. So let's get talking tachlis today, and in that spirit, I'm going to be very brief and dive right into the subject matter and get right to the point. And what I want to really focus on today is essentially an element of what John Lambert in his excellent presentation touched on, which is how to build patterns and systems and structures of trust and collaboration. And on the other hand, I also want to present a industry or industrial perspective to what Eric Goldstein was talking about in terms of how public agencies like CISA have been elaborating public-private partnerships in the context of kinetic conflict. And I really want to think about how we can do an assessment of the role that companies, that industry is playing during this current moment in the broadening Ukrainian crisis. And we've learned, I think it's very clear in the recent months, that industrial engagement, the work and activities of companies across many sectors and across many countries is utterly critical to ensure that there's appropriate coordination and cross-sectoral collaboration to avoid the dangers that are being presented by Russian cyber infrastructure, which John really eloquently and very specifically pointed out. The question, therefore, that I've tried to come here to answer today is, even with short hindsight, are there lessons or patterns that we can distill from our recent engagements with government and within our critical infrastructure sectors in the United States and internationally, in the context of Russia's aggression, that can be optimized or leveraged as we move forward in advancing our collective cyber defense in wartime? And perhaps the most important lesson that we've learned is that we can really only defend against potential attacks on our critical infrastructure when industry at all levels and across all sectors are appropriately supported by actionable and timely information sharing. Now, I know this might be stating the obvious, but given the often stark operational, administrative, and even cultural differences between the public and private realms with respect to information and intelligence sharing, there really do remain significant coordination challenges that require our attention and focus and redress. Bluntly, when it comes to cyber threat information sharing, we really do need to mind the gap. And I can say that it is definitely true that from the perspective of the private sector, for those of us who have been in receipt of security clearances, we've never been in receipt of such broad threat assessments of the type we're seeing in the current Ukrainian situation. Beginning in November 21, when Russia's intentions in Ukraine became very clear, government and industry, as Eric elaborated, began heightened efforts to mobilize resources and coordinate activity. And while government and industry had previously collaborated broadly on things like cross-sector playbooks and readiness exercises, the real-world magnitude and operational complexity of these attacks that we've been seeing is putting everything else we've learned to the test and informing, and I hope institutionalizing new and more defined strategies moving forward. You know, as an association representing broadband providers, USTelecom has sought itself to be a value-added platform for expanding the universe of information sharing recipients at both the classified and the unclassified levels. And as a former national security official myself, during a previous administration, experience has taught me that when it comes to the adequate transfer of information with industry, there remains long-standing hesitancy by our intelligence communities, let's admit it, and national cybersecurity policy leaders to broaden the scope of informed parties in the critical infrastructure space. There really are insufficient numbers of our industry partners who have received security clearances, just as one example. And many of us with high-level clearances are Washington policy representatives and not the frontline operational practitioners who really are the best positioned to act rapidly in defense of known and potential threats. And this is true across our industry. While there's always been a need for continuous improvements, the good news, and the previous panel, Frank and Eric elaborated on this, is we're making important progress, growing information sharing and mobilization efforts across both public and industry players. In the US, one of the most significant developments has been the creation of what was mentioned before, the Joint Cyber Defense Collaborative. We call it the JCDC, which includes both government and industry partners working syncritically together, including our own association's largest members like AT&T and Verizon and Lumen. And one of the very first, and I think important, products emerging from the JCDC was a Russia-Ukraine tensions plan that lays out phases and objectives for operational coordination between the public and private sectors. And it's done so well, and it's done so, I think, with impact. CISA, which Eric represents, has also worked very closely with JCDC partners to develop and share free cybersecurity tools and resources, which, as he mentioned, the Shields Up initiative, which has been beginning to penetrate the public consciousness, I think, on an effective level about cyber readiness. You know, the list has proved particularly impactful, I think, for small and medium-sized enterprises in the United States and other organizations of that scale that are often viewed by our Russian aggressors and other enemies as target-rich and resource-poor, therefore very vulnerable targets. And a central part of our advocacy and continued collaboration with CISA has been to encourage more coordination with the intelligence community and foreign governments to release more actionable and impactful periodic alerts and mitigation strategies to help advance global information sharing. And there are benchmarks worth noting for this that I believe really do augur well for expanding and enhancing future collaborative efforts, including this important Cyber Week that brings us all here today in Tel Aviv. But there are other precedents that I think are worth noting and noting well, including some initiatives undertaken by my own organization, USTelecom, which lay a deepening foundation for future joint efforts at public-private and cross-industry information sharing. So just a little bit of background. In 2018, USTelecom created and convened what is known as the Council to Secure the Digital Economy in partnership with the Consumer Technology Association. These are the folks that bring us CES in Las Vegas annually. We've put together 15 global companies, both from the IT and the communication sectors, to think operationally and act collectively to develop a series of initiatives around cyber readiness that I think have been having a lot of both interest and impact. CSDE, for example, published a report in 2019, which we just updated this year, which identifies several threat scenarios, many of which have proven directly relevant to Russia's attacks that we've been seeing in Ukraine. We've witnessed, as John was mentioning, relentless DDoS botnet attacks against military and financial systems, malware disguised as ransomware to hide Russia's geopolitical intentions, and dangerous attacks on industrial systems where our analysis was informed by previous Russian attacks on Ukrainian power grids and other high-value targets that we've been witnessing. And CSDE's cross-industry network worked to identify 12 potential scenarios, and they were incorporated into JCDC's public-private protocols and playbooks for each scenarios, which are currently in development. So I'm glad that there is a robust and meaningful bridge between the public and private sectors in thinking through how we can collectively stand up to the current situation in Ukraine. CSDE also annually publishes guidance to fight botnets and secure the Internet of Things. Botnets, as we all know, are a favorite tool of Russia's cyber attack and misinformation campaigns. And to better inform our efforts, this past April, USTelecom conducted a global survey of 50 of the leading cybersecurity experts in the ICT domain familiar with operational and policy developments. When asked to identify the support they required most from government, 91%, evenly distributed between companies of all sizes, identified receiving actionable and timely information and intelligence as their #1 operational need. And as cyber threats escalate, we also have done our best to keep small and mid-sized broadband service providers informed about Russia's offensive developments within the limits of what we obviously can share on an unclassified basis. But many rightly feel more granular and frequent actionable threat information is required, and I think rightly so. We hear similar concerns from associations and companies that we're in dialogue with, particularly in Europe and in Asia, about this same concern. So the question we all must work together to answer is, how do we purposefully develop and rapidly deploy better mechanisms for public-private interaction, engagement, and calibration of effort, insight, intelligence, and action, not only within our borders, but in common cause around the world. Because of government-led organizations like CISA and industry-led venues like the CSDE, which I just mentioned, the United States, for its part, is better informed and organized to understand the threat landscape and mitigate many of the most common risks. And it's clear from this gathering that we are not alone in prioritizing this work. Now it's our time to systematize and broaden these mechanisms to ensure critical infrastructure enterprises of all sizes have maximum timely threat information and the latest best practices. And if I can make a plug, I truly do believe that trade associations and business leagues like my own, if properly enfranchised, engaged, and integrated, can become potent vehicles for extending situational awareness, conveying vital information, and coordinating activities on a much broader global scale. The moment demands more integrated platforms and mechanisms for global collaboration and information sharing and best practices as well. And so I'm glad to let you know, to help deliver on this mandate, today USTelecom is announcing the formation of a new venue, the International Communications CISO Council. We're calling it the ICCC, where Chief Information Security Officers representing global ISPs, it's the first of its kind, will convene to address some of the most challenging threats to our borderless digital ecosystem and to accelerating opportunities to drive solutions across all critical infrastructure sectors. This will be, as I mentioned, the very first such communication sector-specific convening platform for global CISOs, and our hope is that it's going to emerge as a model for additional sector-specific coordination in the days and months ahead. The founding members of this new council include AT&T, Lumen, NTT, Verizon, Telstra from Australia, and I'm really delighted to announce here in Israel that Bezek International will be a founding member of ICCC as well. I'm really looking forward to its contributions to our collective work and to expanding the international participation in this important new platform. So in closing, I really want to thank the conference sponsors for the opportunity to share our experiences working through these challenges in the United States. I'm also very grateful to the U.S. Chamber of Commerce for convening the U.S. delegation. And I hope you'll find the perspectives I just offered you useful, just as I have learned from your perspectives shared throughout Cyber Week. Israel really has shown itself to be a leader among leaders, and what you've seen here is a remarkable display of talking tachlis, of what can be accomplished when brilliant and committed people get to the point and work together on the most challenging threats of our time. So toda rabah, thank you very much.
Thank you so much. Thank you.